Welcome back to the Emma Deep Dive podcast. I'm Anna, and joining me today is Eric.
Each episode, we take a deep dive into the technologies, strategies, and regulatory considerations shaping the future of life sciences. And today, we're focusing on a topic that's rapidly changing how laboratories operate at every level.
We're talking about the lab of the future, not just automation and robotics, but what it really means to design data integrity into lab operations from the very beginning.
This isn't a conversation about replacing scientists or turning labs into black boxes. It's about building environments that reduce risk, improve consistency, and generate data you can trust without adding unnecessary burden.
So, with that, let's get into it.
When people talk about the lab of the future, the conversation often jumps straight to robots, artificial intelligence, and fully automated workflows. And while those technologies are absolutely part of the picture, they're not the whole story.
The more meaningful shift happening in labs today isn't just about speed or throughput. It's about fundamentally rethinking how work is designed so that accuracy, traceability, and data integrity are built in, not patched on later.
For decades, many laboratories have relied on highly manual processes. Scientists recording observations by hand, transferring results between systems, managing samples through spreadsheets, notebooks, or paper logs. For a long time, that approach worked.
But labs today look very different than they did even 10 years ago. Sample volumes are higher. Data sets are larger and more complex. Regulatory expectations are stricter. And the margin for error is much smaller.
In that environment, manual processes become a liability, not because people aren't capable, but because humans are being asked to manage systems that are too complex to rely on memory, repetition, or workarounds.
That's where automation begins to matter, not as a futuristic upgrade, but as a way to remove variability from routine tasks. Automated liquid handling, robotic sample prep, and integrated analytical instruments help ensure that processes are executed the same way every time.
Consistency is critical in regulated labs. When the same task is performed slightly differently by different people, or even by the same person on different days, it introduces variability that can compromise results.
Robotics help address that by standardizing execution. They don't get tired, they don't improvise, and they generate detailed logs of exactly what happened and when.
But automation on its own doesn't solve everything. In fact, without proper system design, it can create new problems. Automated labs can still struggle with fragmented data, disconnected systems, and limited visibility into the full workflow.
That's why data integrity by design is such a central concept in the lab of the future. Instead of trying to enforce compliance through reviews and audits after the fact, data integrity is embedded directly into how work is done.
That means instruments that capture data automatically into validated systems. It means eliminating manual transcription wherever possible. It means audit trails that are generated automatically and are complete, attributable, and reviewable.
Most data integrity issues don't come from intentional misconduct. They come from poorly designed systems that force people to create workarounds just to get their job done.
The lab of the future aims to eliminate those workarounds by aligning technology, workflow, and regulatory expectations from the start.
Robotics also play a role beyond efficiency and consistency. They improve safety by reducing exposure to hazardous materials and repetitive strain. And they allow scientists to spend more time on tasks that require judgment, interpretation, and critical thinking.
That shift is important. The goal isn't to remove scientists from the lab, it's to let them focus on science instead of manual administration.
Another defining feature of the lab of the future is connectivity. Instruments, laboratory information management systems, electronic lab notebooks, and analytics platforms need to work together.
When systems are connected, data flows seamlessly from experiment to result to report. That improves visibility, reduces delays, and makes it easier to spot trends or issues early.
From a quality perspective, connectivity also strengthens compliance. Inspectors want to see clear data lineage. They want confidence that results are complete, accurate, and protected from unauthorized changes.
Automation and integration can support that, but only if they're implemented thoughtfully. Poor integration can introduce just as much risk as manual processes.
That's why the lab of the future isn't built by layering new technology on top of old workflows. It's built by redesigning processes end to end with data integrity, efficiency, and compliance as core design principles.
In this episode, we're going to explore what the lab of the future actually looks like in practice, where automation and robotics are delivering real value today, how organizations can embed data integrity into daily lab operations, and what to watch out for as labs modernize.
Because the lab of the future isn't just faster or more automated, it's more reliable, more transparent, and better equipped to support innovation in a highly regulated world.
And that's where the real conversation begins.
As automation and robotics become more embedded in daily lab operations, another layer of complexity begins to emerge around governance and oversight. When systems start making decisions automatically or enforcing controls by design, organizations have to be very clear about who owns those decisions and how accountability is maintained.
In traditional lab environments, accountability is often obvious. A person performs a task, records the result, and signs off. In automated environments, actions may be executed by systems, triggered by rules, or coordinated across multiple platforms. Without clear ownership models, it becomes difficult to explain how control is maintained.
That's why many organizations start redefining roles as they modernize labs. Instead of focusing solely on task execution, roles shift toward oversight, review, and exception management. Scientists and quality professionals become supervisors of systems rather than operators of individual steps.
This shift also affects how deviations are handled. In automated labs, deviations may be identified earlier, sometimes before an out-of-specification result occurs. Systems can flag trends, inconsistencies, or anomalies in real time.
That early detection is a major advantage, but it also requires clear processes for response. Like when a system flags an issue, who investigates, what gets documented, what actions require approval. These questions need to be answered before automation is deployed, not after.
Data integrity continues to sit at the center of all of this. Automated systems generate vast amounts of data, and not all of it is GMP relevant. Organizations need clear criteria for what data becomes part of the official record and what remains informational.
This is where thoughtful data governance becomes essential. Overcapturing data can overwhelm teams and obscure what matters. Undercapturing data can undermine traceability and regulatory confidence.
Access control is another critical consideration. As systems become more connected, the risk of inappropriate access increases. Role-based access, segregation of duties, and regular access reviews are no longer optional.
Regulators expect organizations to demonstrate that only authorized individuals can modify methods, parameters, or results, regardless of whether those actions occur through a manual interface or an automated workflow.
Validation also becomes more nuanced in highly automated labs. Instead of validating isolated instruments, organizations validate interconnected ecosystems. Changes in one system can affect others, which means impact assessments need to be comprehensive.
This interconnectedness reinforces the importance of change control discipline. Even seemingly minor changes like software updates or configuration tweaks can have downstream effects on data integrity or compliance.
As labs scale automation, they also start to see benefits beyond compliance. Turnaround times improve, reproducibility increases, investigations become more efficient because data is centralized and structured.
Those operational gains often drive broader adoption, but they also raise expectations internally. Leadership may push for faster timelines or greater throughput, which can create pressure if governance frameworks aren't mature.
Balancing speed and control becomes one of the defining challenges of the lab of the future. The goal isn't to slow innovation, but to ensure that innovation doesn't outpace the organization's ability to manage risk.
This balance is especially important in regulated environments where the consequences of data integrity failures can be significant. Automation can reduce risk, but only when it's designed and managed intentionally.
Over time, organizations that get this right develop a very different relationship with compliance. Instead of viewing inspections as stressful events, they see them as opportunities to demonstrate robust system design.
Inspectors aren't just reviewing records, they're evaluating whether systems are capable of consistently producing reliable data. Automated labs with strong governance are often better positioned to answer those questions.
Another subtle shift is how labs approach continuous improvement. With more data available, teams can identify patterns that were previously invisible. That insight supports smarter optimization without compromising control.
As these capabilities mature, the lab of the future starts to feel less like a concept and more like a practical reality. Not a fully autonomous lab, but one where technology supports people in delivering consistent, compliant, high quality outcomes.
And as organizations continue to modernize, the distinction between lab operations, quality systems, and digital infrastructure becomes increasingly blurred. Success depends on how well those elements are aligned, not on any single technology.
As these automated lab environments mature, another reality starts to set in. Technology alone doesn't create consistency. Consistency comes from how well systems, procedures, and people are aligned around a shared way of working.
In many organizations, automation is introduced in pockets. One workflow gets upgraded, one instrument gets automated, one lab pilots a new system. And while those pilots may be successful, fragmentation becomes the new challenge.
Different teams may automate similar processes in different ways. Different sites may configure systems slightly differently. Over time, those differences compound, making it harder to maintain oversight and harder to demonstrate consistency across the organization.
That's why standardization becomes increasingly important as labs modernize. Standard methods, standard data structures, standard workflows. Not because flexibility isn't valuable, but because repeatability is essential in regulated environments.
Standardization also simplifies training. When scientists move between labs or roles, they don't need to relearn entirely new systems. That consistency supports both quality and efficiency.
At the same time, organizations need to be realistic about legacy constraints. Most labs can't start from a blank slate. Older instruments, validated methods, and historical data still matter. The lab of the future has to coexist with the lab of the past.
That coexistence requires careful planning. Data from legacy systems still needs to be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. Automation should enhance those principles, not bypass them.
This is where hybrid environments become common. Some workflows are fully automated, others partially automated, and some still manual. Managing that mix requires clear boundaries and documentation.
Teams need to know which steps are automated, which require manual intervention, and how handoffs are controlled. Ambiguity at those interfaces is one of the most common sources of data integrity risk.
Another factor that becomes more visible over time is vendor dependence. Automated labs often rely on multiple technology providers, each with their own software, update cycles, and support models.
Without a clear vendor management strategy, organizations can find themselves reacting to changes instead of controlling them. Software updates, system patches, and new features all need to be evaluated through a quality lens.
This reinforces the importance of supplier qualification and ongoing oversight. Vendors aren't just providing tools, they're influencing how data is generated, stored, and protected.
Cybersecurity also becomes more critical as labs become more connected. Automated instruments, networked systems, and cloud based platforms increase the potential attack surface.
Data integrity isn't just about accuracy, it's also about protection. Unauthorized access, data manipulation, or system downtime can all compromise trust in results.
That's why collaboration between IT, quality, and lab leadership is essential. Security controls need to align with regulatory expectations without making systems unusable for scientists.
Another shift that emerges is how labs approach documentation. Automated systems can generate massive amounts of metadata. While that data can be valuable, it can also overwhelm review processes if not managed carefully.
Organizations need to define what documentation is meaningful, what supports decision making, and what satisfies regulatory requirements. More data isn't always better data.
This leads to a more intentional approach to record review. Instead of manually checking every data point, teams focus on exceptions, trends, and indicators of risk.
That shift allows quality professionals to spend more time on analysis and less time on clerical review. It's one of the quieter but more impactful benefits of well designed automation.
As confidence grows, organizations also begin rethinking how labs support broader business goals. Faster turnaround times enable quicker development decisions. More reliable data supports stronger regulatory submissions.
Labs become strategic assets rather than bottlenecks. They don't just generate results, they enable progress.
But that strategic role comes with responsibility. As labs become more central to decision making, expectations for reliability and transparency increase.
Any failure in data integrity can have broader consequences, affecting development timelines, regulatory trust, or patient safety. That's why governance must scale alongside capability.
Organizations that succeed don't treat automation as a one time transformation. They treat it as an evolving system that requires ongoing attention, review, and improvement.
Over time, the lab of the future stops feeling like a destination. It becomes a way of operating. A mindset focused on designing work so that quality, compliance, and efficiency reinforce each other.
And in that environment, data integrity isn't something teams worry about at the end of a study or during an inspection. It's something that's present in every step, embedded into the structure of the lab itself.
That's when automation, robotics, and data integrity truly come together, not as separate initiatives, but as parts of a single coherent system designed to support reliable science at scale.
As labs move further down this path, one of the more subtle shifts that begins to happen is how confidence is built in results. In manual environments, confidence often comes from experience. From knowing the person who ran the test, understanding their technique, and trusting their judgment.
In automated environments, confidence comes from system design, from knowing that controls are enforced consistently, that deviations are detected early, and that data is captured and protected without reliance on memory or manual intervention.
That shift can be uncomfortable at first. It requires organizations to trust systems in a way they may not be used to. But when designed correctly, automated workflows can actually increase transparency rather than reduce it.
Every action is logged, every parameter change is traceable, every result has context. Instead of relying on recollection or reconstruction, teams can see exactly what happened and when.
This level of visibility fundamentally changes investigations. Root cause analysis becomes faster and more precise because the data is already structured and available. Teams spend less time searching for information and more time understanding what it means.
It also changes how labs respond to issues in real time. When systems flag anomalies early, teams can intervene before problems escalate. That proactive capability is one of the most powerful aspects of automation.
But early detection only adds value if organizations are prepared to act on it. Clear response procedures, escalation paths, and decision authority are essential. Without them, alerts become noise and teams begin to ignore signals.
That's why governance and operating discipline matter just as much as technology. Automation amplifies existing behaviors. If decision making is unclear or slow in a manual environment, automation will expose that weakness rather than hide it.
As automation expands, organizations also begin to see how closely lab operations are tied to downstream processes. Data generated in the lab feeds development decisions, manufacturing strategies, and regulatory submissions.
Any weakness in lab data integrity doesn't stay isolated, it propagates. That interconnectedness raises the stakes and reinforces why labs must be designed with quality in mind from the beginning.
Another important evolution is how organizations think about scalability. Automated workflows that work well at a small scale may behave differently as volume increases. Throughput, system performance, and data handling all need to be stress tested.
Scalability isn't just about speed, it's about maintaining control as complexity increases. That requires foresight and often reveals limitations that weren't obvious during pilot phases.
This is also where organizations start to differentiate between tactical automation and strategic automation. Tactical automation solves individual pain points. Strategic automation aligns with long-term operating models and growth plans.
Labs that succeed over time tend to take the strategic approach. They invest in platforms and architectures that can evolve rather than point solutions that create dependency or fragmentation.
Another shift that becomes clear is the importance of cross-functional alignment. Lab automation decisions can't be made in isolation. They affect IT, quality, regulatory, manufacturing, and even supply chain teams.
When those groups aren't aligned, automation initiatives slow down or stall. When they are aligned, modernization accelerates and friction decreases.
This alignment also influences how labs interact with regulators. Organizations that can clearly articulate their automation strategy, governance model, and data integrity controls tend to have more productive regulatory interactions.
Inspectors aren't just interested in whether systems are automated, they want to understand how risks are identified, how controls are enforced, and how accountability is maintained.
Automation provides strong answers to those questions when it's implemented thoughtfully. It shows that compliance is being managed proactively rather than reactively.
Over time, these changes begin to influence organizational culture. Teams become more comfortable with data driven decision making. Discussions shift from anecdotes to evidence.
Quality becomes less about checking boxes and more about designing systems that work as intended. That mindset shift is one of the most meaningful outcomes of lab modernization.
At the same time, it's important to recognize that not every lab needs the same level of automation. The lab of the future isn't a single blueprint. It's a set of principles that can be adapted based on risk, complexity, and purpose.
What matters is intentionality. Automation should be applied where it reduces risk, improves consistency, or adds clarity. Not everywhere, not all at once.
When organizations keep that focus, automation, robotics, and data integrity reinforce each other. They create environments where high quality data is a natural outcome of good design.
And as those environments become more common, the lab of the future stops being an abstract concept. It becomes the standard for how regulated labs operate in a world where speed, accuracy, and trust all matter.
As all of these elements come together, automation, robotics, integrated systems, and data integrity by design, the lab of the future starts to look less like a radical departure and more like a logical evolution.
At its core, this evolution is about trust. Trust in results, trust in systems, trust that the data being generated can support decisions that ultimately impact patient safety, regulatory approval, and product quality.
When labs rely heavily on manual processes, that trust is often tied to individuals, to experience, to reputation, to informal knowledge that lives in people's heads. While that can work in smaller environments, it doesn't scale well and it introduces risk as complexity grows.
Automation shifts that trust into system design, into controls that are enforced consistently, into workflows that don't depend on memory or interpretation, and into data that is captured, protected, and contextualized automatically.
That doesn't remove the need for scientific judgment. In fact, it elevates it. When routine execution is handled reliably by systems, scientists are free to focus on interpretation, critical thinking, and problem solving.
This shift also changes how organizations think about compliance. Instead of asking how to prove compliance after the fact, the lab of the future asks how to make non-compliance difficult by design.
Audit trails are automatic, access is controlled, changes are tracked, deviations are flagged early. Compliance becomes an outcome of good design rather than a separate activity layered on top of daily work.
As labs modernize, this approach also supports resilience. Automated and well-integrated labs are better equipped to handle staff turnover, increased volume, and unexpected disruptions. Knowledge is embedded in systems, not lost when people leave.
From a regulatory perspective, this kind of resilience matters. Inspectors are increasingly focused on whether systems are capable of consistently producing reliable data, not just whether individual records look acceptable. Like,
Organizations that can demonstrate strong system design, clear governance, and intentional control tend to navigate inspections with greater confidence. Not because they're perfect, but because their processes are transparent and defensible.
another important outcome of lab modernization is consistency across the organization. When workflows are standardized and systems are aligned, results are more comparable across methods, labs, and sites.
That consistency supports better decision making at every level. Development teams can move faster. Quality teams can focus on risk rather than routine review. Leadership can make strategic decisions based on data they trust.
At the same time, it's important to acknowledge that modernization is not a one time effort. The lab of the future isn't built and finished. It's continuously refined as technology evolves, regulations adapt, and organizational needs change.
The organizations that succeed are the ones that approach modernization as a long term capability, not a short term project. They invest in governance, training, and alignment just as much as they invest in technology.
They also recognize that automation isn't about eliminating people from the lab. It's about enabling people to do their best work in an environment designed for accuracy, consistency, and integrity.
As expectations around speed, transparency, and data reliability continue to rise, labs that embrace this mindset will be better positioned to support innovation without compromising control.
Ultimately, the lab of the future isn't defined by robots or software platforms. It's defined by intentional design, by workflows built to reduce risk, by systems built to protect data, and by cultures that value quality as a foundational principle, not a checkpoint.
When automation, robotics, and data integrity are aligned by design, the lab becomes more than a place where tests are run. It becomes a trusted engine for scientific progress in a highly regulated world.
And that's what the lab of the future is really about.
Thank you for joining us for today's deep dive. If your organization needs support navigating advanced lab automation initiatives, strengthening data integrity frameworks, or modernizing regulated laboratory operations, Emma International is here to help. You can reach us anytime at info@emmainternational.com or visit us at emmainternational.com.
Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay innovative.